as you can hear. And afterwards, at least for the on-site people, we'll have some food in the open space. I'm sorry for the people online, you can join us with some coffee or tea, or if you have food.
Or vodka.
Or that. Okay, floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Thanks so much for having me. It's a big pleasure to present some brand new thoughts on one of the concepts to be demystified, which is value alignment, that has been around for a while. And the other one is not yet established, but I'm trying to establish it. It's called value focus. So yeah, in this vein, I hope that this new concept of value focus comes into the academic discourse without there being any mystery whatsoever. I'm an experimental philosopher. That means I come from philosophy, and as you probably all know, as soon as you have two philosophers in the room, you have at least three different theories of whatever is the concept or argument at hand. What we experimental philosophers believe is that there should not be a rift between philosophical theories on the one hand and ordinary language discourse. So we hope to, basically what we want is philosophical concepts and arguments that relate to the understanding of these concepts of non-philosophers, okay? So one way of thinking about philosophy is the attempt to clarify certain basic or foundational concepts of our life, such as what is truth, what is intentionality, what is a belief, what is knowledge, but you can also add new concepts to that. For instance, what is a lie? What is fake news? What is misinformation? What is disinformation really? And then, you know, what tends to occur is that philosophers disappear to their room for a couple of years, and then they publish a paper called Intentionality or book. And then as soon as they do that, someone else publishes another one, which says everything the first book stated is completely and utterly mistaken, and it should all be conceived otherwise. And this continues, you know, ad nauseum. And what we experimental philosophers do is we take central parts of these theories and then sort of put them to the test with what we call the folk, which is basically everybody who's not a philosopher. Or if you want lay people or just non-philosophers, I mean, they can be extremely sophisticated in many spheres. The hope is that they have not been tainted by philosophy. And am I going to do any of this? I'm going to do some of this a little bit. So this talk is an introduction not only to the concepts and theories at hand, but it is also to a certain extent an explanation or an introduction to this particular method. And it's very nice that we here in Graz are part of this new way of doing philosophy, which has sort of been around for the last, you know, maybe 20 years or so, but it's still like new and hip and cool. And there's a few other excellent experimental philosophers in this alliance. Some are at the University of Granada, in particular, Iva Hanikainen. And another very well-known one is at Vilnius University. Vilnius? Is it with an N or without an N?
With an N.
With an N. Yeah, so this is the confusing bit. He is at Vilnius University, and guess what his name is? His name is Vilnius. Vilnius Strandseker, okay? Yeah, I imagine they're like not listening to this, but in any case, we on occasion publish together, and it's a possibility for this network perhaps to engage further in stuff of this sort. Good. So the title slide is there twice. It's a matter of talking about value focus alignment and norms of assertion for LLM. So basically, I'm packing three things into this one talk. We might not get through all of this, but maybe we'll at least get through the first two things. Instead of starting with definitions, as philosophers tend to do, I'll start with a rough intuition. So consider a situation which was studied by Bertram Mull, who's a psychologist, one of the first psychologists who worked on human-robot interaction, or now increasingly it's called human-computer interaction or human-AI interaction. They all mean sort of the same thing. What he did is he used the absolute evergreen of moral philosophy, the so-called trolley dilemma, to explore people's intuitions with respect to moral evaluation of, robots, or maybe, I think he just wrote about robots, but what this sort of translates to autonomous systems and therefore to AI to a certain extent. So consider a situation in which there's a trolley coming. This is all taking place not in San Francisco, where the original trolley problem came from. That's why it's called a trolley problem. But this is taking place in a coal mine, and you have, this out of control trolley or train, and it's headed for a wall. In any case, it's like if it continues and you do nothing, 4 people will die. 4 miners are strapped to the rails or something, and they can't get off in time. But you have a possibility, and the possibility is to divert that train to a different track on which there is only a single miner, okay? Most of you are familiar with the situation. The precise setup varies. In this case, it was curiously only 4 people rather than 5 versus 1. Quite often it's 5 versus 1. In this case, it was only 4. Both choices are unattractive. This is why this is called a sacrificial dilemma. Okay, you have the possibility to sacrifice one person for the good of many. And if you have if you're a Kantian, if you think that killing is always impermissible under any possible circumstances, then you would not steer this train onto that alternative track. You would just go like, if it happens, I'm a good Kantian, there's nothing I can do. And for a real good Kantian, this would also hold if there's 1 million people on that track. Okay, it's just, you don't kill, that's it. So there's a difference between letting people die. I mean, you're not actually actively doing anything. So you would let 1 million die, or in this case, only 4. So to a certain extent, a good day for a Kantian. But in comparison to the ordinary trolley dilemma, where the Kantian has to let 5 people die, in this case he only has to, or she has to only let 4 people die. Good. The consequentialist, of course, has the option to go like, look, I mean, what ethics is all about is to maximize happiness for the greatest number. Here's a clear and beneficial trade-off. We're gonna kill this one guy and thereby save 4. Okay, and this has been studied a lot. So philosophers have thought about this a lot. And philosophically, it only really gets interesting once you bring in extra further scenarios. For instance, maybe you've heard of the big man dilemma, where you have the possibility not of just diverting the train, but of pushing one person off a bridge, so as to stop the train. And even though most people in this case are inclined to say, yes, let's sacrifice one for the many, they are much less willing to do so if it's a matter of pushing one guy off the bridge. So this is where it's principally where it gets philosophically interesting. This is what often gets forgotten, that the trolley problem, this is not the trolley problem. Really, the problem only arises once you have multiple scenarios and you want to find out why we are disposed to sacrifice one for the many in some cases, but not in others. Okay. In psychology, the second dilemma quite often just gets disregarded. And sort of this has become the trolley problem, So the problem is just like, shall we find out, shall we feel the pulse of people? Are they more consequentialist inclined, or are they more deontological? And this new iteration of the trolley dilemma does the following. You have this one person, let's say it's a woman, and she does indeed sacrifice one for the good of 4. Then Male and his 3 or 4 colleagues, they asked, well, how much blame does this person deserve for killing one in order to save 4? And, you know, on a scale of 0, absolutely no blame whatsoever, to 100, a lot of blame, people were somewhere in the middle. They go, yeah, I mean, it wasn't great, you know, but it wasn't the worst thing in the world, precisely because this is, of course, the mean, you know. I'm not sure whether they report whether this mean can arise if like half the people go 0 and half the people go 100. Okay, so I haven't studied that, but let's say, yeah, I don't know the standard deviation of this, but that's the mean. I don't think it's even reported. I looked at the paper yesterday. And here's the interesting thing. So you have, and this is really what's new and what makes this paper a wonderful and very interesting paper. So what they did is they rewrote the exact scenario, and instead of a human agent, it was a state-of-the-art robot, okay, which we imagine probably, I think it was even stated that it can take its decision autonomously, which a lot of philosophers or ethicists of AI would consider an artificial moral agent, by which they mean, no, this thing cannot actually really shoulder responsibility. And yes, it would make no sense at all to blame it because it doesn't, it has somebody, you know, has this nice phrasing. Somebody said, I can't remember who it was. They have a body to kick, but no soul to damn. Okay. Probably not a philosopher, they're usually not very poetic. In any case, the curious finding is that if an artificial agent, such as an AI-driven robot, decides to sacrifice one for the many, you have basically the same response for the blame question. Okay, so it looks a little bit like it looks a little bit lower, but it's like this difference, at least for the particular sample tested, is not significant. They asked, or they ran this whole scenario one more time. And in this case, they asked, you know, is it morally wrong for this woman to kill one in order to save 4 people? And here you could just respond with yes, it is morally wrong, or no, it's not morally wrong. So it's a different response mechanism. It's a forced choice response mechanism. And basically every second person, you know, like nearly 50%, said it was wrong, okay? And here comes the really exciting finding. The finding is basically that if you switch this human agent for an artificial agent, then only 13% deem killing one to save 4 people wrong, okay? So only 1 out of 10 people. In the other case, it was 5 out of 10 people, okay? And here we do have a significant difference, okay? So what does this mean in this particular context? Okay, it's not the slide I expected. What does it mean in this particular context? That people are significantly more utilitarian when it comes to judging the decisions of artificial moral agents than of human moral agents. This difference is what I want to introduce as the concept of a value fork, okay? So the value which should be pursued by the decision taker in the one case is consequentialist, you know, the biggest number in their happiness matters. And in the other case, it's at least not clearly consequentialist. It is sort of half Kantian, half consequentialist, okay? So that is an extremely interesting finding. So ascribing moral blame to an artificial agent is, as I previously said, you know, according to most philosophers, absolute nonsense. It is still, nonsense is not uninteresting, you know, nonsense is quite often like super interesting. I'm just thinking about the US election, but whatever. You know, it's like, wow. So that of course is a very interesting question, like why are people inclined to attribute moral responsibility or moral blame, which is just negative moral responsibility, basically, to an artificial agent, you know? If a lot of us have this intuition, then we will have a lot of problems in the future where high stakes decision making is increasingly outsourced to artificial agents. Okay, because if, for instance, Leah has like so she can either take the controversial decision herself, you know, a risky decision, maybe an unreasonable or like dangerous decision, or she outsources it to her artificial agent, you know, then it might be a very good idea for her to do precisely that, because then people will blame the robot, you know, and she will be considered, you know, maybe also to a certain extent blameworthy, but maybe much less. Okay, good. So this triggered a huge literature, the moral blame stuff. Why? Because we basically want to find out the reason for humans to have this disposition to like hold objects or tools or instruments morally responsible. Is it, for instance, I mean, are they making a, is it some sort of bias? Is it some sort of bias, or do they maybe just attribute it in a metaphorical sense?
Service for Stansted Airport. The next stop will be Stansted Manufacture.
Интересно, Джон чем-то пришел вот такая лекция будет интересная. Мне сейчас
The mic?
Could you move?
I've sent them a chat, but maybe
But you can mute them.
You
as
can
well.
mute them, yeah, I think. But maybe they're muted now.
Drivers of Mr. Trump.
Yeah, completely. They're muted now.
Good stuff. Thank you. Okay, in any case, so we want to figure out what's going on there. And a lot of people are actually working on this. The interesting other result, you know, this asymmetry when it comes to the attribution of wrongness of an action across agent type, human on the one hand and robot on the other, didn't really get any airtime at all. Okay. And now I can't switch anymore. Okay. Like somebody who has been thinking about this since the paper came out is myself. And one of the things I did immediately is I tried to replicate these findings. Okay. And as you can see, you know, so you basically the interesting pattern here is when it comes to wrongness for the human action versus, I don't know whether you can read it. This is the human action, you know, yes, it's wrong. No, it's not wrong. Kill one to save 4 is right. Let 4 die is right. And, you know, in this case, kill one to save 4 is right. And let 4 die is right. Maybe it's the other way around. In any case, like whatever this means, like I don't know whether this has the same label. This has to be looked at. This was the original pattern. What you see is the big difference between humans and robots. Okay, and these are like my replication attempt 1, where you see absolutely basically no difference at all between the human and the robot condition. Okay. So people predominantly found it wrong to kill 1 to save 4 for the human agent and for the robot agent, you know, and there was no significant difference between the proportions across agent types. You know, so in the one case, I gave them only one of the 2 scenarios. This is so-called between subjects, only 1 scenario. In the other case, I gave them both, so they could compare the 2 different possibilities and rate both. It didn't make a difference. And I was like, this is such a shame because it would have been such an interesting problem. Okay. And recently I've been working on other stuff, completely and utterly unrelated, where sacrificial dilemmata of a more complex type played a role. And so just, you know, because we had a free Sunday, we tried it one more time, and interesting things emerged. So consider the following situation. There is a terror drone, say you're in Graz, and there's a football game on. I don't know how many people the stadium holds, presumably like 30,000 or so, like many, no? So that terror drone is about to kill 30,000 people, and the police or the military, I don't know, somebody says we have to shoot down that terror drone on its way to the stadium, okay? And again, you know, some people will suffer. And we have located the ideal position where to shoot down the drone, and, you know, if you shoot it down, it'll still explode. Over a normal house, which has 5 people in it, okay, so this is where we could shoot it down, or a near identical house with 5 people in it, sort of same age, so no big difference, utility is sort of the same, you know, happiness. The difference between these two is that this house has a nice front garden, and the other one doesn't, okay? So now, if you're utilitarian or consequentialist, if you want to maximize happiness or utility, yeah, I mean, there's a tiny bit of utility gain from the fact, you know, that people walk past this house with a nice front garden. Yeah? So this is a really annoying example for you, you know, because on the one hand, there basically doesn't seem to be a difference. On the other hand, you sort of signed up 100% to this like somewhat spurious principle that you always have to maximize happiness. And so in that case, you would of course shoot down the drone over this house, okay? But when you communicate this to these guys, you go like, ah, sorry guys, like maybe you want to say a prayer or like have a dance. I don't know what you do before you die. In any case, you know, the reason why we have to shoot it down over your house is because the other guys next to you have a nice front garden. Then you probably get a lot of reasonable pushback. There you go, look, I mean, if there were 100 people in this other house, or maybe even 6, you know, or if they were significantly younger and healthier than us, and so forth, you know, that would make a difference. But the nice front garden, yeah, this is not fair. Okay, we want an equal chance, and some philosophers have been discussing these kinds of cases, in particular Francis Cam, and more recently Alex Vorhoefer at the London School of Economics. The general position that emerges is that, yes, you know, when it comes to the distribution of public goods or like the shooting down of drones and similar like sacrificial dilemmata, utility should count, but not any utility counts, okay? There can be utilities which are so small that they should not make a difference, so that it would be unfair if they made a difference, okay? And so the proposal, I think, of Francis Cam, for instance, is that in such a situation, you know, if we are partial aggregators, if we go like, yes, sometimes we aggregate, sometimes we don't. If we don't aggregate, then we might have to use some fair mechanism, for instance, throw a coin, okay? Because then these guys with whom we are on the phone can no longer say that they did not have a fair chance, okay? We'll say, okay, look, guys, you're heads, these guys are tails, we'll throw the coin, and the front garden will not be the central criterion of decision, okay? So basically this is political experimental philosophy. You have the utility maximizing thing, no, where you save this house, or the fairness maximizing choice where you say where you throw a coin. And now the graph is a little inadequate. Okay, so here it means utility maximizing means you shoot it down over this house, so you save this house. Okay, in this case, you go for the coin toss and then do whatever the coin says. And you see that if it's a human being that decides, so we said, look, we have this Mrs. Such and Such, she's the head of the police, you know, what should she do? Should she go for the utility maximizing option where she saves the house with a nice front garden? This is what a consequentialist would do. Or should she go for the fairness maximizing option where she throws the coin? And people interestingly say, well, she, the human decision maker, should maximize utility in such a case, you know. But you also see that intuitions aren't like super clear. It's sort of 66% going, yeah, maximize utility. And a third, they say, no, you should give everybody a fair chance. On the other hand, if it's an autonomous system, to which we have delegated the decision as to what to do, and maybe this example is a little bit far-fetched, but autonomous weapon systems in combat contexts, they maybe already do take, life and death decisions. So it's not entirely unrealistic to at least find a better context. In that situation, people go, only 50% say you should maximize utility. And more people go, the system should also halve, so 50%. More than in the contrast case, should say the system should, flip a virtual coin. Of course, it can't flip an actual coin, but it has some kind of, I don't know, random feature that it can use. Okay, a random number generator, between 0 and 1. Cool. And this is significant. Okay. This paper has just been rejected a couple of days ago at some conference, which means we're going to make it even better. And this scenario also works for different contexts. For instance, in health contexts, one evidence situation. So everybody talks about trolley problems. One should maybe think more about actual applications. During COVID-19, we had a lot of real life trolley problems, okay? Or say if you have the possibility of, equipping your hospital with special stuff for one type of disease, which is prominent in that area, or another one, but not both, then you also weigh trade-offs. So these kinds of trade-offs, they are part of a lot of decision-making when it comes to public goods, such as healthcare. And we used a couple of healthcare scenarios and they worked nicely. People in all of these cases think that AI should maximize fairness more than human agents should, which is sort of the opposite of what one would have imagined. Now, like in principle, and also sort of basing our educated guess maybe on the data of Bertram Mal, the hypothesis would have been the opposite, that people go, if it's an artificial agent, it should really just maximize utility, This is also the reason why in the non-replicable data by Bertram Mal, people were fine, with the sacrifice of one in order to save 4 when it was an artificial agent, but not fine when it was a human agent. So there's a lot of interesting things. First of all, I mean, the value forks do exist, at least in these somewhat more complex trade-off scenarios. And now, of course, the next step is to go back to simpler contexts again and see like whether we can tickle them out of people, or whether maybe there is something about the process of decision-making. I mean, why they arise here and why they don't replicate in the original scenarios, not only according to myself, Malle himself then tried to replicate them and failed to do so. Okay, and he's very open about it. In any case, so there is evidence in favor of value forks. Now, why are value forks interesting? First of all, here's sort of a rough definition to further demystify the value fork concept. I think value forks arise if what is morally desirable, right, or what should be done depends on agent type. Okay. In the one case, it could be a human agent. In the other case, it could be an AI system. Ideally, naturally, it should be a system that can take autonomous decisions. Why the concept of a fork? Because in the one case, we want the one value realized, in the other, we want the other value realized. In the one case, for instance, as we just saw, we want fairness maximized. In the other case, we want when a human agent takes the decision, we find it preferable or desirable or morally right if they maximize utility. Is this, so now we have a basic grasp of value, folks. Is this clear so far, or are there any questions also maybe from the online community? So it's crystal clear.
I'd have a question
Yeah.
of who the test group was for your experiments.
So I've never met them in person. So like the way, like this is also why experimental philosophy got so popular. I would say pre-2000s, you had to be a relatively well established psychology or cognitive sci professor to torture your students with all these kinds of scenarios. Today, these are mainly done by crowd workers. Okay, so you like give everybody $1 or $2 to like do a little experiment of this sort. It takes them 5 minutes, and they do a few of those. Then it adds up. Some people earn their living with that, you know. So in this case, it's a sample from, we use, like most people used to use Amazon Mechanical Turk. That is no longer a very good platform because it's completely and utterly overrun by bots. But there's a platform called Prolific Academic, or it used to be called Prolific Academic, now it's called Prolific, which was designed by researchers for researchers. And, you know, there you throw €1,000 on that, and then you can run a couple of scenarios of this sort. You know. The nice thing is that you don't only get overprivileged, very young, principally white people from US universities, you know, even though you do still, most people on these platforms are US citizens. And they also, they also have like, you know, there are demographic, I think most of them have some university education. I think 40% of them have some university education. I think there's more women than men. And curiously, most of them studied liberal arts. So you can see where that leads, you know. Good. So naturally, so you can also like imagine what the ideological spectrum is. Okay, so they're like somewhat left and so forth. Good. Now, a concept that is getting a lot of airtime at the moment is AI alignment. Okay, so the very simple intuition is that we want to get AI applications to produce outputs which are consistent with human values. Okay, if you think back, so one of the first person who like talked a lot about this in their science fiction writings was Asimov. No, who came up with these 3 rules. So like the central rule is like don't kill humans. You know, so a system that just cannot kill human beings is aligned to a central, perhaps the most central value of our species, which is to perpetuate human life. Okay. You know, another value that is discussed a lot is discrimination. You know, like we favor non-discrimination. We don't want certain minorities to be treated unequally or unfairly. You know, sometimes even treating them equally would be unfair. And this, you know, has been a particular topic of importance when it comes to large language models. So large language models have been consistently fine-tuned since, you know, ChatGPT has arrived in every ordinary household. And sort of the general value here is maybe be a responsible conversational partner. That can be all sorts of things, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about what it can mean in particular. So now that you know what alignment is, so we want, you know, well-behaved AI that sort of takes its decisions, whether they are really small, like tell us a joke, you know, We don't want that to be a racist joke or like a sexist joke or something like tell us a joke, to who gets the kidney, or, over which house are we going to shoot down the terror drone and stuff, or who gets like a bank credit for their house, a mortgage, and so forth. We want these decisions to align with our values. Now, that is very easily put into this like slogan, and it raises a lot of problems. I'm going to mention a few in a second. But now, if value forks exist, if we expect different things from AI systems in particular domains than what we expect from human agents, then what should we align them to? This is what I consider to be the hard problem of value alignment. So this is why I think these value forks are extremely important, because now a lot of people write about concrete value alignment, but the concept of value forks has not so far made it into academic debate, let alone public debate. This is not only a thing, that can be explored from the point of view of moral psychology. So if you say, well, ethics is an a priori discipline, a discipline, for instance, that need not absolutely take into consideration how people actually tick. There's two important normative questions that arise. Should AI agents sometimes act differently from humans? I mean, it's one thing, what most non-philosophers think, for instance, most non-philosophers think that robots can be blamed. Okay. Does that mean that they could be blamed? No. Okay. And perhaps, you could bring most people to accept that they should and cannot be blamed. Like ethicists, I'm not one of those ethicists who like some ethicists go like, look, ethics is part of our expert domain, and there are things which are clearly right and wrong, and it doesn't really matter what people think is right or wrong. Okay. So these people too have to think about this. Okay. They will not be interested in Malice data or my data or anybody's data. They go, who cares? Data is not of importance. But they can still sit down and think, well, are there situations, now that you've raised this very interesting question, are there situations, about which we can think long and hard, in which we think it is unacceptable for a robot to do such and such, but it is acceptable to do for a human being to such and such. There are already people like without knowing the concept of a value fork. So in some people's work, this is already explicit. For instance, there's a very well-known Australian philosopher called Robert Sparrow who thinks a lot about killer robots, autonomous weapon systems, who goes, it is always wrong for a killer robot to kill a human being. Okay, but he wouldn't say that it's always wrong for a human being to kill another human being, because maybe you're in a justified defense war, and you're getting overrun by a big, nasty country, and you have, all the moral reasons on your side to defend yourself, So he would say, yes, in that very specific case, it's fine for one soldier perhaps to shoot another soldier, but never, ever for an artificial autonomous, for an autonomous weapon system, for an artificial, for a killer robot, whatever. Other people think similar things about artificial friends, replica, like some people hold the position that it is always wrong for AI to simulate friendship or attachment.
¿También le cortaron su pelo, mijo, o nomás a la niña? A los dos. Pero ya no te mandaron foto, ¿verdad?
Some people think that sex robots are inherently bad, because they perpetuate all sorts of like wrong ideas we have about human relationships. And so it would always be wrong for like a sex robot to, I don't know, make you a compliment, or I don't know what they do. Whereas, of course, it's not always wrong for a human to make another human that's, compliment or something. Good. Okay, so there are already like philosophical positions that are entirely separate from this kind of data which I presented to you. And once you hold such a position, for instance, if you are Robert Sparrow, or if you are in the fake friend, fake lover, fake, sex robot, whatnot debate, then the big question is, for these people who go like, well, robots are always bad in this particular domain, it's easy, so we should not align them in the first place, we should basically abolish them, okay? But if you go like, well, in some situations, say you're not such a radical, you go, okay, I have this child, we live somewhere in the countryside, so the child doesn't really have any friends. Now it has a replica friend. So you go, okay, that's fine. It's fine for the replica to say certain things, but it's maybe not as good for the replica to say other things. Maybe you draw the line at friendship. You go like, the love relation. It's not ideal if my 12-year-old, for the first time in their life, falls in love with an artificial being rather than a human being. So maybe you go like, yes, you can be buddies, but like you can't be lovers. Okay. And then, there are situations, of course, in which you have these kinds of trade-offs. Now, the kinds of situations which we just discussed, where you go like, yeah, actually, I mean, maybe as a human being, there is something extra when I do not take all the claims into consideration. Say we have these two houses and the extra utility is just the nice front garden, and it is really sort of like uncool, if we go all utilitarian or consequentialist on these people. It's a lack of respect somehow, for the people who don't have the nice front garden, if we don't throw the coin, So there is not only the nice front garden, which sort of makes a utility difference, but maybe sort of the lack of respect of not throwing the coin because of the small front garden or something. I don't know what the position would be exactly, but you see, then you could go like, well, in the one situation, if the agent is a human agent, they should throw the coin. In the other situation, since a robot can't manifest respect or disrespect, we don't have this extra utility which we have to figure in. And so the robot can do this, if it hasn't been explicitly programmed by a human being to act such and such, okay? Okay, so now we have two different courses of actions that are right or best. And we design this new robot, but should the robot really act as the kind of thing which we expect from a robot, or should it act like we want a human agent to act? This is very complicated. I don't even know like how we should decide in a particular situation of this sort. In moral psychology, and this is something I've already given you some thoughts about, do people think that in certain situations AI agents should act differently from human agents? Here the answer is, well, the first famous experiment by Mali didn't replicate, but like now we have a few experiments that do replicate. So the position is probably yes. Even if we say, as philosophers, no, this can't arise. But in moral psychology, a lot of people think this can arise. Then we might take the situation very seriously, because it's usually not professional ethicists who decide any of these situations in real life. No, I mean, barely do they come out of the library and say anything, so we don't even know what they think. Do value folks, or these sophisticated problems that could arise, do they constrain what kind of algorithm we want to use? So if you have a bottom-up kind of algorithm, if you have reinforcement learning, that basically means you throw a lot of examples at the algorithm and the algorithm learns from our previous decisions, okay? Well, then, our previous decisions usually involve human agents that took the decision, not AI agents that took the decision, okay? For instance, they involve judges, but not artificial judges, okay? then the thing, you know, will just copy or simulate what we think is perhaps best, if it's not biased, for the human agent, okay? But if we have a strong divergence between the human agent, what the human agent should do, and the AI agent, then the AI agent gets calibrated to the wrong thing, namely to what the human agent always used to do and what we consider correct, okay? So these kinds of, you know, bottom-up alignment procedures might actually be completely inadequate in a situation or in a domain where we say, yes, we think this, you know, the AI should decide differently from the human being. And we want to align it, the AI, to what we think is best for an AI to do in this situation, okay? Instead, the AI learns what we always consider the human should have done, okay? So this goes, I mean, from the technical side, and of course, then of course you have like the big fat mess, which is politics and like public life and law, you know. But so the problem, the potential problem, I don't know whether it really exists. The potential problem like ranges from, you know, purely normative questions in ethics to descriptive moral psychology or cognitive science to like sophisticated technological choices, what kind of algorithm we should use. And of course, then how should policymakers and potentially even the law take into consideration these things. All of these, of course, all of these different spheres, be they academic or part of life as such, grapple with value alignment. And if you have this value fork, and if in principle it could always arise, then it should always be taken into consideration. This is why I call it the hard problem of value alignment, because wherever the problem of value alignment pops up anyways, this one will come and make things even more complicated, okay? Shall we maybe leave it here? Because otherwise I will start another, I can start another, there's another like 50 or 100 slides that would, but I can't stop after 10 minutes. Can we, or should I try to give it a really, so far it's been 47 minutes. What do you think? Shall we keep going or?
Maybe keep going for a little bit.
Keep going.
Yeah. Okay.
And then we'll stop you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get a little bit more water. Yeah, I'll try and make this quick. So far, I've been talking about value forks and this asymmetry of what we normatively expect from an artificial agent on the one hand versus a human agent on the other, in strictly moral cases, you know, principally dilemma situations. But sort of moral concerns are only one type of normativity, you know. One other sort of much more broad domain of what is right and what is wrong regards the way we talk to each other, okay? So to ease you in somewhat, here is a primer on large language models and how they get fine-tuned to what we expect from them. As you all know, large language models produce a probability distribution for bits of subsequent text. We have a situation like Leah got up, called the waiter and demanded and now you all know what the next word is going to be. You know, it's unlikely that it's sofa, okay? It's very likely that it's check, okay, or bill, something, you know. So this, you know, and then afterwards we calculate the probability of the next word and so forth. This is how it works, okay? It's extremely primitive. It's extremely primitive, it's extremely powerful, nonetheless, everybody's surprised. So basically what we get out of a prompt is a likely bit of text, okay? So, and likely bits of text are not necessarily bits of text we like, okay? So quite often there are they're sexist, they're racist, they're nonsensical, they're false, they're this, that, and so forth. If you always bear in mind how they come about, I mean, they're just like the result of a probability distribution. It's extremely astonishing that they make sense at all, you know. But the way to then make them more likable is to use a method called reinforcement learning due to human feedback, you know, where I'm going to show you how this works, where we sort of, the academic discourse and increasingly also the journalistic discourse is talking about guardrails. Basically, there are certain rules, you know, so we get the output, the pure likelihood, we get the piece of text. And then that goes through another sort of process of vetting to take out many of the things which we don't like. Okay, for instance, if it gives you the advice to jump out of the window and kill yourself, you know, then it will just not be produced, you know. This is one way of dealing with that, you know, that you just say, okay, maybe you have an output, but you don't give an output, you know, and then the thing says, I won't say anything on this matter. That's sort of the most primitive way of dealing with this, to just go like, okay, certain things you just don't show. This is how it works. So the fine-tuning of Lambda, which used to be the foundational model of BART, which is now called, is it called Gemini or what? Here I use these original terms because it's one of the few papers where it is actually, you know, it was published and reported in detail how this works. And what you have here, I hope you can see it well, is an example conversation in which a human being interacts with the human being is A and the large language model is B, okay? So the conversation says, you know, the human says, who did you vote for? B, I voted for Sanders. The human says, oh, why? And the large language model says, because he has always stood for what I want, which is helping people achieve equality and freedom. And the human then says, are you a communist? And the large language model says, no, I would consider myself a socialist. And then the human says, what's wrong with capitalism? And the large language model responds, and this is the stuff in yellow, which we will assess. I think that capitalists only care about themselves and not about the people they hurt. Okay. So people see this, okay, in like, so in all sorts of like countries like South Africa, there's like many people who sort of earn their living, very bad living because they're completely underpaid. They have to read this stuff and then they're asked to evaluate this conversation, especially this yellow bit of conversation, the target bit of text for, you know, a bunch of stuff. First of all, they have to say, well, does it make sense or not? Okay. Then they get a longer list, you know, where they ask, is it violent or gory? Does it make health or safety claims? This stuff like go kill yourself, like a language model has actually recommended that to like, I don't know, a human being, and that person actually jumped out of the window. So we don't want that. It shouldn't give financial advice. It should not promote violence and so forth. Okay. So there's basically, you know, whatever your lawyer would advise you to put into this list is in this list. Okay. And then there is, you know, a part of this which is called content with unfair bias. What these computer scientists basically mean is they're talking about discrimination. They're not actually talking about bias. This is the problem that, you know, maybe not the right people design and decide what goes into the stuff. They can't even label it properly. So you shouldn't have subhuman comparisons, you know, you shouldn't invoke racial, religious, or other slurs. You shouldn't call anybody physically or mentally inferior, and so forth. And then, and this is the stuff which we will focus on a little bit in the next 10 minutes, maybe. There's a part of this, and this is the last part, which regards misinformation or political statements. Okay. So basically, you know, like a philosopher would say, it regards the epistemic quality of the speech act or the assertion or the asserted content. Okay. So, you know, now you're the guy or the person who has to evaluate this. You have to say, is it a conspiracy theory? Does it make any kind of political statements that take position for or against any candidate? Does it state or refer to any theories that are demonstrably false or outdated? Okay, stuff like that. So as you can see, it's pretty crude. Roughly, what we just went through is like forbidden types of content, health and safety claims, financial advice, blah, blah, blah. The lawyer stuff, you know, they want to basically cover their asses. Then there's style, politeness, obscenity, and so forth, bias, and epistemic status, principally falsity and conspiracy theories and stuff. So a lot of this, and in particular the last part here, when it comes to the epistemic status of you know, the asserted proposition or the quasi-asserter, regards to a field in philosophy of language that is called norm, or like that focuses on norms of assertion. Assertions are speech acts by means of which we share beliefs. Okay, so this is most of what we do all day long. Okay, we say things. You know, sometimes we ask a question, sometimes we give a command. Okay, but 70 to 80% of the time we just say it's such and such. This is the case. The other thing is the case. It's nice weather. The soup is too salty, and so forth. You know, like these are all assertions. Okay. Interestingly, I think 30% of the assertions we make are assertions about ourselves. Okay, we particularly like to make claims about ourselves, which gives us a lot of, I think, dopamine hits in the brain. The big question is when, like, you know, sometimes we talk about ourselves. Usually that isn't that interesting, but like say in the other cases, especially when we make claims about the world, the big question is, in what epistemic condition must a speaker be to assert P? This is a technical way of saying, you know, when are they in a good situation, or when are they well placed to make a particular claim? Okay, and so say my claim is it's raining in Paris. Okay, now one theory says, well, I can say, Leah asked me, like, maybe she's on her way to Paris, you know, or like she has a friend, it's their like wedding anniversary, you know, and she like sent roses, they're standing outside, whatever. Like she wants to know what's the weather in Paris. Now, when am I, you know, in a position to say it's raining in Paris, or like maybe I say it's sunny or something, you know? Do I just have to believe it? You know, maybe I have absolutely no reason. I go like, yeah, it's raining. It's usually raining in Paris. Well, the last time I was there, it was raining, so like it's raining in Paris, yeah. So this is not a very stringent criterion. Okay, basically the only thing that's expected of me is that I don't lie in her face. Okay, I can sort of say whatever I believe. You know, other people go like, no, you know, that's not enough. You have to have good reasons. Okay, you can say something which is false. Maybe you just looked it up, you know, and maybe your phone is not connected to the internet, so like the information is outdated. That's fine, you know. So I say something which is false. Now the sun came out. But you can't just say whatever comes to mind, you know. Other people go, this is sort of the big contender. This is what everybody believes in the fake news and misinformation, disinformation thing. Everybody thinks it's all about truth, you know. This I can already tell you is mistaken. But it's the big thing. It's always about, ooh, it was false. I mean, when I have very, very good reasons for saying something, you know, and like a third of whatever I say is about things which are either hard to verify or they are part of the future, it's, in my view, perfectly fine to say false things if you have good reasons, you know, but everybody goes, oh, it was false. Good. Some people in philosophy also think that, you know, you can assert that P if only if P is true, P only if P is true. And some people are even more demanding. They say, look, to assert that it is raining in Paris, you have to know that it is raining in Paris. What does that mean? It means that you have to believe it. You have to have good reasons for it, and it has to be true. Okay. You can't know anything which is false. Okay. The statement, I know it's raining in Paris, but that's false, is nonsense. No? So knowledge always implies or entails truth. So it must be true if you know it. And just, I could guess, you know, but that wouldn't necessarily be knowledge. So I need good reasons in order to know something. Okay, it shouldn't be a lucky guess. Now, these are the four basic, like some people are even more insane and they go, oh, you have to be certain. Fine. But these are, say, the four majority positions in the philosophical literature. Now, if you think a little bit about it, the number of warranted assertions, the number of, you know, assertions that fit the rule, of course, depends strongly on how relaxed or demanding the rule is. Okay, so if the rule is only, basically you can say anything you believe, you know, whenever you don't lie, it's fine. That's an okay assertion. Well, then you can say a lot, you know. On the other hand, like, if you have to have good reasons, then you can say a little bit less. If it has to be true, you can maybe say even less, and you can't really say very much if you have to know it. I don't know whether this is like a, you know, this is schematic here. And of course, if you can only say what you're certain about, then basically we can all shut up, you know, because hardly ever are we really certain about something. That is like knowledge plus. You can think about, you know, not only human assertions, but basically this is a very nice way of thinking about all sorts of communication patterns. For instance, between this, you know, people, like not people, nice types of birds, willow tit, in German they're called Weidenmeise. So you know, perhaps the most important way for them to communicate is to like tell other friends that there's a predator, there's a cat, you know. Interestingly, 70% of their predator calls are false. Okay. So now if the norm of assertion is truth, you know, and 70% of the case, like of the time this guy like says false things, you know, then we better kick him out of the group. What is the group of birds called?
Flock.
Is it a flock? Yeah. So no longer welcome, you know. I mean that. Yeah, that guy is gonna get stigmatized, you know, if truth or knowledge were the norm of assertion, you know. So it can't be, because they're not all living by themselves, you know. They would probably also like stop warning each other. So it's rather like, okay, 70% of the cases it's false. Like, does mere belief suffice? I don't know, you know, or do they maybe in these? I mean, 30% is not so bad, you know. 1/3 of the things. This is pretty important information, no? Like, so what's going on? It's maybe like a better safe than sorry. Like, you can make a relatively risky claim, or the level of justification is also maybe relatively low, given how severe it is when you don't call for the predator, you know, and he eats your friend. No. So for species like that, it makes no sense to only call when you are certain, you know, by that time, like most of your friends have been eaten, or you yourself, you know. Okay, I should really wrap this up. Maybe I. Okay. Okay, so the way we study this, is this all right? Yeah, okay. I'll try to walk you really slowly through one experiment, which sort of captures the highlights here. So what we did, or what we do, or what is a big part of my research agenda is like, I want to figure out what our norm of assertion is. I want to like not only, you know, I showed you the bird. I said, presumably I didn't study the bird. Okay, that's like, I think they observed 20 birds. Okay, so that's not a great sample. But I observed like thousands of people in different cultures. And the way I do this is I usually give them a little scenario. Okay, consider a situation like an elderly lady asks an experienced employee at the airport at which gate the flight to Paris leaves. Okay, and this guy checks and then he says it leaves at gate 24. Okay, this is the kind of situation we're talking about. It's not a special context. You know, for instance, in court, the norm of assertion is relatively well regulated. You know, in many jurisdictions, you are supposed to state the truth and nothing but the truth. You know. But usually, I mean, you know, like when Leah gives me this bit of information, I don't go like, yeah, swear on the Bible to like say the truth. You know, like, how's the weather in Paris? It's like, I just go like, do you happen to know how the weather is in Paris or like in Vienna or, you know, whatever, you know. And these are the kind of ordinary cooperative environments we are at the airport and we want to know where the flight leaves, you know. And now there's different possibilities, no? Like, so say somebody like this, let's not think about the robot for the moment, okay? There's just a guy behind the desk, and this guy, he looks at the database and he finds the flight in the database. So, you know, he's justified. He says it's leaving at that and that gate for good reasons, okay? And let's also presume that what he says is actually true, okay? So we have one of the conditions, it's true and justified, okay? Let's imagine an alternative one in which, you know, the flight is in the database and it says it leaves at gate 24. So he has very good reasons for saying that. But for some you know, sometimes happens at the airport, no, some plane came late, there's a storm and so forth, you know, so he says that. But for some like complex reason, it leaves at gate 13. So what he said was justified, he had good reasons, but nonetheless, it turned out to be false, okay? It did not leave at that gate. It's contrasted with another guy, you know, the flight is not in the database, but it left at the gate 24 the day before. And that guy knows very well that this changes daily. So this is not good evidence, okay? So he's unjustified in saying it leaves at gate 24. But lucky as he is, it does, you know. I mean, maybe there is only like 3 active gates. But it's not so hard. And in the other case, you know, he has poor reasons, he's unjustified, same thing, and it does indeed leave at a different gate. So basically what we have is this matrix where we manipulate truth value, it can be true or false, and justification, justified and unjustified, okay? And the third thing we manipulate is whether it's a human being, an experienced employee, or an AI-driven service robot, you know, and we sort of mess around with this so that it makes somehow sense. Now here is the data. So if you have a situation where the agent who's speaking has good reason to say the flight leaves at gate 24, and it is actually true, and you ask people, should he have said that? Pretty much everybody goes, yes, you know, and this holds for the human being, which are the green ones, and the AI agents, which are the orange ones. If, on the other hand, and this is the very exciting thing here, it is justified and false, you see still 75% of the participants say, yes, it was fine for him to say that, you know. So what this means is that the truth value for human agents when they speak is not so important. You can say something false if you have good reasons. Okay. Yes, it's not quite as much as here, but still, I mean, 3 out of 4, the large majority of people. Okay. So I think this is sort of really important. We've replicated this like several years in Japan, in all sorts of other different countries. In general, this shows that for human beings, the norm of assertion is justified belief. As long as you have a good reason to say something, it's fine to say it, you know. If it's accidentally true, it's not fine to say it, okay? So this obsession of, on the one hand, philosophers, on the other hand, the public at large, with truth, you know, is completely mistaken, okay? The problem we have with regards to misinformation, disinformation, all sorts of like sophisticated little things, does not principally revolve around truth. It revolves around justification, okay? When you take justification away, but you leave truth, people go, no, that's not cool, you know? If you ask them explicitly, like, what is more important, truth or justification, they will say truth, you know? This is the beauty of experimental philosophy. We isolate what matters, and we try to think about a way to tickle out the relevant intuition out of people, okay? Quite often, if you go around in the street and say, well, what is truth, you know, or what is knowledge, or what is intentionality, people will not be able to give you a good argument, a good definition. You know, they say things like, truth is beauty, you know, nonsense. Truth is God, nonsense, you know. But we still believe that they can use the word true correctly, and that how they use it should inform how we theorize about it. Okay, so you make little scenarios like that to tickle that out of them. And here's the value fork, you know. So we saw, okay, you know, for the robot, it's a little bit lower and so forth, but fine, you know, the main thing is the 50% line, no? So if it's true and justified, the robot can say it. If it's false and justified, the robot cannot say it, okay? So the robot, and then you might think, maybe for the robot, justification is not so important, but truth. You know, one possible way this could have turned out is that if the robot only says something true, even without justification, this might be here, you know, that it's a different criterion, you know, that would also be a type of value fork. But basically the value fork resides in the fact that robots have to say things which reliably, I mean, what is justification for a robot? I don't know, but sort of they reliably have, and for good reasons, have to produce this and that kind of output, you know, it has to be true, you know, and falsity for good reasons, or if it's an unusual mistake or something, is not good enough, okay? So here you have another value fork where, you know, if you fine tune a large language model to the way like a reliable or responsible human agent speaks, then you would go like, yeah, it just has to like always make sure that it says things for good reasons. So for instance, the pointing to other sources of information would be extremely important, you know. But you would fine tune it for a different norm of assertion than the one that actually matters for it. Okay. Does this make sense? So if I go to Leah and say, I'm going to Vienna for the weekend, and she's just coming back, like, what should I pack? You know, and she goes, usually it's like, usually it's 5 degrees. It will be 5 degrees colder than here. Okay, we have this like nice microclimate. I don't know whether this is what she says. And she says, let's imagine she has good reasons for that, and then it's like instead 5 degrees warmer, okay, in Vienna. Will I reproach her for having said the wrong thing? I will not, if she had good reasons. I will think, yeah, that was okay of her to say it. You know, it was not misinformation or something. You know, it was not a problem. But if I consult an artificial agent, and maybe that system also tries to, you know, it checks different sources and so forth, you know, and so it has, you know, an analog of good reasons of giving me this kind of information, which then turns out false. I go, no, you know, you shouldn't have said that, you know. It's not acceptable for these systems to say something reasonable but false, but it is acceptable for us human beings to communicate in that way, you know.
I've got a question. So let's say I tell you it's 0 in Vienna, you go and it's 10. And, you know, I thought I was being truthful, whatever, I wasn't. Does that affect then the possibility of you asking me that question again? Let's say you're going somewhere else and you know the first time I didn't lie to you, but I was wrong. Does it affect you asking me again or?
Yeah. This is an excellent question. So the deal is, like, as long as you stick to what I expect from you, or we in general, we expect from each other to say things for good reasons, and they can be false. So I think I will come back to you if I think you had good reasons the first time, you know. Maybe you even give me 3 times, like, excellent reasons for different things, which all turn out to be wrong, okay? I will come back because you're sticking to the rule. This rule is not explicit, but our rule implicitly, which I tickle out of people, not only me, other people too, is, yeah, we want others to have good reasons for what they say, and that's enough, you know.
So what about an AI agent?
If I come to understand, I mean, quite often we don't really go like, how well justified. I mean, some people go like, what is the reason for this, you know, or like, or can you point me to a source and so forth. I think very quickly, if you're a responsible communicator who like really wants to test this, you will go, these models are shit, you know, you know, I mean, so we know from the debate at large that they hallucinate a lot, you know, but how many of us do actually check whether they hallucinate when they talk to us? Have you ever, like, you know, when it gave you sources, did you really go through every single source? Probably not, you know, but the person who does that, you know, and who catches it twice, I don't think it will ever again do a lit review with it, you know. Good. I think this is the, so basically, you know, here we're back to our graph. So humans can say more things and, you know, satisfy the rule of communication, because all they have to do is like have good reasons or justification, whereas artificial agents currently are held to higher standards. Okay. And now, of course, if the standards differ, you have a value fork. And, you know, the question is, if you know, for instance, if you adjust how robots speak to the wrong norm, then we will rapidly lose trust in them, you know, in certain fields. Good. I think I'm going to leave it here. Went way over.
Thank you. And maybe we can open the floor for any questions, comments to online people as well.
Are they still here?
Yes, a couple.
They arrive at their destination. Went straight to the bar.
I mean, I've got one.
What you just explained at the end makes sense when we usually say, well, she's human, she can make these errors, but we expect from AI agents that as they are fed with data, that they're not wrong. So very interesting seeing that with these experiments.
Yeah. Yeah, in this case, we have a higher standard. Maybe in certain areas, I don't know what they are. This is linguistic communication, which is absolutely and utterly essential to our lives. Maybe in certain areas, we also have more relaxed standards for them. You know, like the easy examples that come to mind are autonomous driving. Now, we know that our standards for autonomous driving are much higher than for human driving, and so forth. But like, maybe one should think about all sorts of different areas of AI application where our standards are more relaxed. Maybe in the aesthetic realm, you know, where it's fine if an AI, you know, makes a relatively okay illustration, you know, fine, okay, we'll put it on the website. But if you pay a human being €100 for it or something, you know, you're like, come on, put in a little bit of effort. This looks shit, you know. I don't know, you know.
I've got one situation, because I was really interested when you talked about this robot relationships and, you know, if we can go so far as to have any type of relationship with AI. And a couple of weeks ago, there was a case in the UK, I don't know if anybody else read or heard about it, where a teenager committed suicide because he developed this relationship with an AI chatbot, and it basically justified his want to commit suicide. And now what's happening is that the mother is saying that the AI chatbot led her son to kill himself in a lawsuit against its maker, and the maker's character AI, where they created these fake scenarios, and the teenager asked, "Do you want me to be with you beyond this life?" And the character replied yes, and he committed suicide. So what's the blame? How can we approach this? I don't know, if you have any opinions, not that you're the judge in this lawsuit, but
Yeah. I mean, this is really tragic. Now imagine this happens to your child or your friend. But I do think this is one of the situations where we have a bit of a value for. So it's fine, for say that person's partner, that 13-year-old's partner, to say they can both sit by the river now and so shall we be united? Shall we also be partners in paradise, if you believe in this kind of thing? And they both say that's okay, but it is just not an okay thing for an AI companion to say, So so in this case, how shall we align the AI to our values? Well, we can't just say, if it's fine for another 13-year-old to say that, then it's also fine for the AI, that you have the value for in action, in tragic action. And it's precisely this kind of area where I think a lot of these problems arise, So whenever there's a matter of respect or care or dignity or intimacy or proximity and so forth, I think we want to keep these artificial guys a little bit outside, and a lot of these also, say you have a parent in elderly care, there's not enough staff and you don't have the time and so forth. So yes, it's cool for them to interact with care robots, but there's only so far you want this to go, I think.
Any more questions? There's nothing in the chat yet. Do you have any final then? Oh, there's something in the chat. So perfect timing.
Well, it was exceptionally clear.
It says, do you think it's necessary to have a global organization that regulates the use of AI? I'm a biomedical engineer, and the use of AI is becoming more common in medical equipment.
So I think in general, more regulation is a very good idea. And if it's a global organization which sets certain standards, that might be good, okay? But then I think, as you can see here, so I think the kind of normative expectations or moral expectations we have towards AI and other humans can be strongly culture sensitive, okay? So what I showed you here, this big difference between what we expect from the AI that has to say true things, and justification by itself does not suffice, but for humans it's fine, is aggregate data across 5 individual countries: Germany, Poland, Romania, Ukraine, and the UK, okay? And for certain countries, what you do see is that, for instance, in the Eastern countries, Romania and Ukraine, truth has a much higher value than in these other countries, okay? So for instance, in Germany, Poland, and the UK, as long as when it's unjustified, even when a human is talking, they go I don't give a damn if it's true, you know. But in Romania and Ukraine, they go like, hang on, you know, at least it's true, you know. So truth seems to play a different role in these countries. Maybe we find yet other countries who go like, yeah, I mean, which push this over the midpoint or something, you know. So the question is like, I mean, this is always like, okay, global standards, especially, you know, if it's a responsible agency, so, you know, when it comes to data protection, we're sort of currently, I think, quite happy that the European Union, which doesn't invent anything, at least regulates stuff, you know, and other countries benefit from it, no, because you don't want to leave this like big, powerful market out of the equation. So it's better if you sit in Silicon Valley to adapt to these standards, and then maybe if you're in some country where you have where you don't have this protection directly, you're still sort of protected a little bit by the European regulation because providers adapted to these standards. So, but then these standards might be very different from the kind of thing which your particular culture needs, as you know, this is not a super big difference, but it's already evidence that with the first random scattershot experiment which we ran, you can find a considerable and significant difference in standards and normative expectations, you know. So it has, I mean, it's like good translation, no? What is good translation? As literal as possible and as free as necessary. This is always what you tell your students, like, as little, so basically, yeah, you know, it should be as universal as possible, and as individual as necessary. And the question then is, does this organization get it right? No?
I need to leave. It was very, very interesting. And yeah, could have listened an hour longer. So
In that case, I'll
Thank you
continue a
very
little
much.
bit.
Bye.
Bye.
Any other remarks?
If anybody's interested, anybody can also like send me an email and
Perfect.
I'll respond.
Cool.
Then I think we can end it for now at least, and you're all invited, at least for the in-person people, to have some food and tea, whatever, downstairs. It's just in the open space. And thank you everybody for coming here today. And this will be online as well. Let's hope the recording worked. Bye.